Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI, a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Today, we're discussing AI natives, how Gen Z and Alpha are redefining the workplace, plus headlines for digital leaders. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. Podcast followers can get preferred pricing of up to 45% off at irpaai.com/NetSuite. My co-host today is my good friend Kieran Gilmurray. He's a senior analyst for IRPA AI, an author, industry thought leader, globally recognized authority on AI, automation, and digital transformation. Lots of accolades, including top 50 global thought leader and best LinkedIn influencer for AI. Kieran, it's been a minute, man. Good to see you again.
I know. I've been traveling and running around the world trying to get a little bit more knowledge for us to impart to the people who want us to share our wisdom with them. Unfortunately, though, Dan, no one's offering me 200 million to come and work with them, but I'm assuming anytime soon that Meta is going to be knocking on your and my door offering us rock star salaries just to come across to chat.
It's all about who you know, Kieran. You know, you got to get ChatGPT working on some networking for you.
That's it there. Get an agentic piece of labor in there, mailing Mark every day. I'll do it for a tenth of that. You get what you pay for, mind you. So it may be 10 times less than our friends who are offering the 100 or 200 million pound salaries, but we'll give it a go. How have you been?
Very good, buddy. It's summertime, of course, in New York. And, we went from, cold weather to 100-degree weather because we don't get spring anymore. So all good. But enjoying the swimming pool and the beach and all that stuff in my spare time. But I have not gotten a $200 million offer yet. Since you started there, we'll start there. I mean, we've talked AI arms race on and off for maybe a year now, but this is now hitting the work sphere. These guys are going after each other, and the newest victim is Apple. Apple's top AI executive going over to Meta, as you say, for a $200 million package. But a couple of things here, that I found interesting. One is just, it's becoming more and more of this, top, 1% of 1% of 1%, right? One of the things I want to talk about a little bit later is what's happening to the rest of the workforce, the middle level managers losing jobs, and then you see these headlines, right, of big paydays. But the other part of this story is that there's a lot of rumors around Apple just losing its edge as it relates to AI, considering outsourcing the brain behind Siri to Anthropic or OpenAI. So a couple different levels to this story, but things are. I feel like I say this every month. Things are heating up, but they are.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Not surprising. And let me delve into a little bit of the, working our way back through that. If you notice over the last couple of years, the big tech companies in the world, let's take IBM as an example. It used to be a closed shop. Now how they're winning is, do you want to call it co-opetition and cooperation with what used to be some of their biggest competitors? And they're actually going to market with clients, offering them what the client wants as opposed to, potentially what IBM wanted them. So this, narrow world of we answer everything, everybody inside of a business knows it all, and we shouldn't be partnering or cooperating with everyone else. It kind of feels old hat now. Open up the drawbridge, wherever you can get the brains. If you can cooperate to create greater value, you should be doing it, in my personal mind, as opposed to trying to be everything for everyone. And the salaries don't surprise me either. Like if you look at, baseball stars, if you look at basketball stars, if you look at, footballers in the Premiership in the UK, those are multi-billion-dollar industries, but they're not in the same league, billions of dollars wise, based on the turnover of Apple, or friends Nvidia or whatever else. They're just extraordinary amounts of cash. So why shouldn't the top performers get, an extraordinary amount of money? The only one thing I would say, and it would be not quite as palatable as we might like, Microsoft just laid off 15,000 people over the last couple of months. Now, there may be nothing odd in that, only on the basis that it's tied up with software engineers who were going. Remember back in the day, that was gold dust to get a software engineer. Now AI is taking over the world. But it's one of these things where you sort of go, it must be quite galling if you're in a role, you've just been laid off, you're getting a paycheck of maybe, 60, 70, or a really good salary for software engineer in some parts, $200,000. And actually now someone's being hired for 200 million. That's one person, not the 15,000 on your payroll, who potentially could make, dare I say, a bigger impact than one person. So again, we live in interesting times that get more interesting by the day. But I'm a huge fan of, your top staff getting their just rewards, considering, the billions that these companies make every year. And there's nothing hotter than AI, and there's nothing going to guarantee you more profit and more money over the next numbers of years than AI as a platform. So let the rock stars earn their money. But
You bring up a great point, right? I mean, maybe this is the first time where people in the corporate world are kind of getting the level of compensation that people in the sports world are getting, and to your point, maybe arguably better ROI, right? It's interesting, but yeah, I mean, listen, I think. As you know, I've hated to be the alarmist. I'm usually the defender of a lot of these technologies, but we've talked last year and a half a lot about the effects on the workforce, and tried to slow down the panic a little bit about coexisting with AI. But if you look at some of these numbers you alluded to, if you look at some of these numbers, I think the reality is hitting, much quicker than many thought. I mean, this article in CIO magazine basically says, tech employment generally, not that top role, but tech employment in general is essentially in a free fall. It's down 175,000 jobs since 2022. Meta, Google, you mentioned Microsoft, they're just gutting the middle level management, or kind of forcing them out due to back to office mandates or performance improvement plans that are, just weeding out, low performers. There's a study that came out of Gusto, the payroll company, this past week, that middle level managers are disappearing, the fastest. They interviewed 8,500 businesses, and the number of managers has gone down 50% since 2019. So just that middle part of the corporate structure just bleeding.
Yeah, but again, not surprising. Like if you follow history, do you remember a couple of decades ago? I don't think it might have been Drucker, the famous management consultant, who come in and said, strip out your middle layer. They're the people who are blocking things. Just get a conversation direct from board or senior leadership team to the front line. And every business did it around that time. And guess what happened? Businesses stopped performing. Businesses stopped functioning. And then everybody went, oh gosh, why don't we put a middle management layer back in? And that's what they've done over the last couple of decades. And for me, the middle management layer is always interesting because, Dan, I go in, I look at businesses, I restructure them, I build them up, I work with startups. The middle management layer either make or break your business, because the senior leadership team managing, 50,000, 20,000, 10,000 people, you can't do it without putting bodies in place to, make the actions happen in the middle. And there's very few companies like the Ubers of the world where, AI is essentially managing the workforce to a large degree. But it's that middle layer that can decide whether a project works or whether a project fails. And in the AI world at the moment, the businesses that I go into, unless you've convinced that middle layer that it makes sense, and they're sitting there going, well, if I manage less team members, do I not get less money? Or how do I manage this agentic workforce? I'm actually going to keep doing what I'm doing until you explain it to me. And you have a senior leadership team who can't explain it to them. So they're blocking everything, or the naughty ones are. The best middle managers are making stuff happen. They are the quarterbacks of the business, where the instructors can sit in that box up in the top end of the stadium and watch down at how glorious they were for hiring the star manager to make things happen. But it's one of those areas that we've really underinvested in years. We put them in, we expect them to perform, but we don't teach them to coach. We don't teach them to mentor the managers that we do put in. And you've seen this, Dan, time and time again. You're a great salesperson. We'll make you a manager. Actually, that person should never have been made a
Yeah.
manager for earth. So we're sort of seeing, a rinse repeat of cycles. What I'd love businesses to do is actually invest in that middle layer, not to make things more operationally efficient. That should be happening anyway, but to grow the pie. Now, the job losses, and I worry about people who lose their jobs because it's families, it's mortgages, there's a whole host of things to it. So don't underplay this the slightest. But when you look at the numbers, 175,000, it's a big number to you and I because we're imagining another 174,000 people. But I mentioned IBM a moment ago, and take any other big company, about 450,000 workers. Every year, about 3% of their staff, go anyway, and that's through their own volition. So that's about 15,000 to 40,000 people. You put five or six, seven big conglomerates together these days, their own natural attrition is that number and more. The software engineering one isn't surprising. And I sat at a conference a couple of years ago in Belfast, and it was 2.5 years ago. I was helping curate it and said, folks, learn AI fast. If you don't learn AI, you're going to be out of a job. And nobody kind of believed me at that stage because you and I see these things a little bit earlier than most people, having been in the industry, tracking the news and seeing what works and what doesn't. This year at the conference, instead of 3 tracks just about forcing the audience to listen to AI, out of the 17 or 18 tracks, 13 of them were AI. The number of people who were doing software testing who you couldn't buy, it was unaffordable in Belfast, in my opinion. Now they've laid off most of them. They don't exist as jobs. So it's a logical job. It can be coded. Yes, I don't believe every engineer can at this stage be coded and done away with. But there's rules to this game. And therefore, if I can make a better tester and can work 24/7 and do all the stuff that's logically been done by someone else, I'll automate it. Like, if it can be automated, it will. And this is, dare I say, to a degree, faster, but a natural part of the workplace. In that, 100 years ago, yes, guess what? We put tractors in, it took people into offices. The best job at that stage, the height of echelon of employment in London, was a clerk who used to write the debits and credits in an office in London. Now those jobs have been done away with. So we've less saddlers, we've more software engineers. Now we're going to end up with far less software engineers, or far less of the average software engineers. And we're going to have people who use AI, if not AI itself, to create, really great content. I think there's still pain in this area because people are copying in code that they don't know. They're taking, code from open source websites that contain bugs and whatever else, but it'll work itself out. And therefore, if I'm in that industry, I would be worried that if I don't know AI, I definitely will get replaced by someone who knows AI. And over a period of time, I'm going to have to shift how I actually, develop value. But in my career, Dan, and this, I hope people take this advice meant in the best way, never wait to be disrupted. You need to constantly upskill. You need to adopt an approach that, you're an economic entity. And unless you invest in yourself and upgrade your skills and don't go into an area that can be automated, then it's nonsensical what you're doing. If it can be automated, it will be.
Yeah.
So again, with my total empathy for anyone who's in a job redundancy, restructure, let off place. But please, 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 we talk about businesses constantly needing to innovate. We as economic entities and individuals need to constantly learn and constantly innovate and constantly get used to change ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I wonder though, and again, I've been on board with the train of jobs aren't going to go away; they're just going to change for a while. But you look at some of these numbers, Kieran. Mark Benioff at Salesforce is saying 50% of the work at the company, not just software development, across the company, is being done by AI. Microsoft is saying they saved $500 million in its contact centers alone last year, deploying AI, and they're not reinvesting it in people. They're reinvesting it in infrastructure, AI infrastructure, $80 billion in AI infrastructure. So, at some point you wonder, okay, there's still going to be some jobs, but if I don't need 1,000 call center agents, I only need 100. And I'm going to take that $200 million and instead of spreading it across, 100 people, I'm going to give it to one guy, plus some infrastructure, things the paradigms are going to shift. And but I think that even underscores your point even more, right? If they are going to shift, then be the one, be that rock star, that guy who, maybe doesn't make 200 million, but is so indispensable that they'll, pay you whatever you want because you're running the infrastructure or whatever.
Yeah, Mark Benioff, he really has been on the forefront of talking about this. And agentics has been something in Salesforce for a while as well. I will not pretend to know too much about the company, too much about the market, in depth, in detail, and the same with Microsoft, because what you see in the surface and what's underneath are very often quite different beasties. I think you'll see a massive movement in firms attempting to use AI and automation and anything they have to try and, cut costs operationally. It appears to be, for some of them, a one-trick pony. Whereas what I want to see is actually how can we grow the pie? How can we be more productive, more innovative? Some companies have done that. You see examples of companies that have automated 80% of their standard HR queries. And you know something? Fantastic. Because I don't go into a Domino's pizza anymore and order it. I literally, I'm on my app. All these things I can do. I don't bank anymore because I can do it on my mobile phone. This is natural, dare we say it, economic development, automation, technology, changing things underneath our feet. I think it's the speed of it that's probably catching people unawares. It appears to be quicker and faster than anything. If you look, and we go back to our example earlier on, like the first industrial revolution took 100 years, steam to whatever. The second one took 100. The third one took 50. The fourth one arguably took 25 years to get to digital. Now, could we argue, even though AI is an 85-year-old overnight success story, could we argue that we're in a new digital AI revolution? And if we are, that's only taken 6 years. So 100, 150, 25, and 6. The curve, the speed is going quicker than ever. But what that teaches you, to me, to a degree, is don't necessarily become a specialist unless you're that 1%. How do you become a generalist that learns and unlearns, that uses all of these technologies to become more productive? Because the one thing I think will help us is that in most Western countries, there's a declining birth rate. So therefore, actually we need this less people with more tools to be more productive, to earn money, to keep more of us alive, and in the health benefits and the tax benefits that we absolutely need. But it's not one where I'm betting my career. The bit is, I constantly I recommend this to everyone. I constantly look forward as to what's coming, where are the signals, what do I think is hot, what do I think is not, take, small bets and then jump in. I've never waited on a firm in my life to control my, my learning. I've spent money on my own career. I've never waited on a company to tell me where to go. I treat myself very much, whether I'm in a business or working for myself, as an economic unit that needs to be to provide value, to be able to receive value. And therefore, look, if you and I look at some of the smoke signals, we've seen automation years ago, we've seen AI, we've watched agentics. This is the first generation of this technology, and that's the scary bit for people. This is version OpenAI 4.5. It was 2 only a couple of years ago. 10 ain't going to be in 10 years' time. So things are going to change. So now we go, do you want to watch this happening, or do you want to, sit, listen to us, learn, change your career, get into this, market and industry, find your niche, do the things that AI can't, and actually provide value that someone wants to pay, if it's not an obscene, gorgeously obscene amount of money, but certainly, you'll be able to pay your mortgage next year and the year after. But personally, I see more gig jobs happening over the years, AI and automation fitting in wherever businesses can put it in. And it's up to us to take control of our own careers, not wait to be impacted by, prestige employers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good segue to our main topic, which is AI natives, right? So we used to talk about companies being born digital. Now you have a generation of people that are kind of born digital, right? And you talk about middle level managers. I mean, I feel like we are. Maybe not you and I particularly, because we're in the industry, and I'll make myself feel better a little bit. But there's a lot of people in our age groups that are kind of the middle level managers of the generational gap, right? They're not the boomers, they're not ready to retire yet, but they're not born digital, and so you see this mismatch between if you watch the news, oh, there's all these jobs open, and then meanwhile people are getting laid off left and right. There's just this mismatch between the jobs that are out there and the skill sets of the people that have that are looking for the jobs. And you wrote this really interesting article, how Gen Z and Alpha are redefining the workplace. So how does it evolve over the next couple of years?
Yeah, soothsaying might be the best one. Yeah, I find this fascinating for lots of reasons. There's always been, like, let's go back 10, 20 years in our career, Dan. How many times did we see people getting laid off and the next minute, like, let's take big data. At the stage, data engineers were getting laid off, coders were getting laid off, people who knew CRM systems were getting laid off, or ERP, because the next thing was data analytics. Now we've got AI. This is going to keep continuing. And what I see is there's a definitive mismatch between jobs available and skills. But this for me is a downfall of companies. I need my, people strategy, my business strategy, and my tech strategy intimately entwined. I should be, if I'm running a big company, preparing, and I do this myself. I know what I'm doing in 18 months' time with high credibility, high possibility, but leaving myself open that there might be more disruption along the way, because to be so fixed would be nuts. But companies operate in the now. Like, how many are doing pestle analysis? How many are doing SWOT analysis? How many hire a chief innovation officer? How many are hiring someone whose job it is to look in the market to determine what's coming next, versus how many are reacting with what's in front of them today? So unless your people, your business, and your tech strategy are intimately entwined, I don't know what you're doing, but I see it all the time. I have seen some really good instances recently where now, and I don't recommend this to be fair, where the chief HR officer is now becoming the chief HR plus chief technology officer, because they're going ahead is going to be digital and human labor, and they need organized by one person. Actually, get your CEO, your CTO, and your CIO to talk. It might actually be easier and cheaper in the long run. But that's the current workplace. Now we've got not just millennials, because it's funny being on stage listening to people complaining about Gen Z, going, they want promotion, they want mental health, they want work to treat them nice. And I'm going, damn, I wish I was Gen Z. We got it wrong in our generation. We'll do whatever hours we're told. Joyfully take being bullied to a certain degree in work. You have to work weekend? We'll not even ask, we'll just do it. But the next generation don't want that. And that's beautiful and that's wonderful, and they're right and we're wrong. But now you've got Gen Alpha coming in, and the millennials are complaining about Gen Z. Gen Z are starting to complain about Alpha. Everybody doesn't spend enough time understanding each other. But this newborn, not just born digital, because that happened. This is Uber's children, dare I say. This is AI natives, not digital natives. And they're coming into workplaces all over the world, because I get to go to Lisbon and Ireland and Boston and wherever else. And I'm meeting all these people, and I'm meeting the employers going, look at the world we have. Come in and meet us. Come in and talk. Meet the team. They're designing the businesses for what they've always known. They're designing the businesses for what they like. And this new generation of AI natives are coming in going, I don't want to work there, because that's like going back into the analog age. I'm using Netflix. I'm using Uber. I'm buying what I want on my phone. I've got digital reflexes. I've got AI on speed. I've got flexibility. But you're asking me, to eat a pony here. I wanted a racehorse, and I want a digital racehorse. Why would I work for you? And they're just not getting it. And we've struggled with this for years, that, what we have come to accept, the legacy systems, the manual reporting, the rigid hierarchies, we're just reinforcing it. Whereas actually, if we're serious about creating a workplace that delivers huge value and people want to work in, then we need to have a place where Gen Z, Gen X, the millennials want to work. But actually what we need to do is create a workplace where everybody wants to work. And I see some great examples of, millennials and Gen Z doing, brilliant tech, brilliant ideas, wanting to run, almost before they can walk sometimes. But I love that confidence and I love that capability. And then I see the boomers sitting in business, technically not understanding the tech or the AI or what the hell's happening, but they love to mentor. And their experience and their emotional intelligence is huge. So how can we get reverse mentorship going to make, AI and digital natives throughout everybody in the workforce, so that, we're career pathing everyone, 18 months ahead, so that there is no mismatch, so that we've got people who want to be in a business that works really well, that's exciting, that's forward moving, where people, tech and business strategy all go together to make a profitable business. Imagine something as simple as that.
Yeah, we have this kind of model in our minds of people with an AI assistant, which may very well be the reality that we're in or going to be in. But you bring up a great point, and you mentioned in this article of kind of this partnership model between the older, more seasoned generations who can add some experience and industry nuance to it, but paired with somebody who exhales, as you say, technology, instead of it being this hierarchical, like, hey, you got to pay your dues and I know everything and you're the young guys or girls, and you're going to do things my way, right? There's this interesting pairing between the experience and the elder, and the new way of doing things, if companies embrace it. But are they like because for all the years I can remember, Kieran, as a tech evangelist, I've always been the one dragging companies, into emerging technology. AI does seem a bit different, but is that paradigm ever going to shift? Is a senior executive ever going to really, be willing to take the risk on a Gen Alpha to do things differently?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it, Dan? Because if you look at some of the pressure that's on these senior executives, they've got 1, 2, or 3 years to make an impact, or they're gone. The days of actual careers where, look, I made a mistake a year ago, but I learned, and it's cost the company a bit of money, but over the longer term, it's going to cost them nothing because we'll never make that mistake, are gone. It's almost, look at Tim Cook at the moment. I've seen a couple of press reports at the moment going, he needs to be sacked. And you're going, what? Hold on a year. Yes, they've fallen a bit behind on this surface, but they've made billions. It's one of the most valuable companies in the world. And 6 months ago, they were a hero. Now they're zero. This short termism, it comes with pain. And I think it's crazy. I'm not saying accept failure over the longer term, but there has to be some balance between, look, how do I learn? And I'm going to make a mistake. And if you want a culture that, permits forward-looking mistakes, in other words, don't get it wrong again, and you're not getting to make mistake after mistake and call it experience, then we're going to have to change how we actually approach our employment. I've seen lots of examples where people get really comfortable. Why we've always done it like that. No, that should never be the case, but it's been the case for 30 years. And I guarantee you and I, if we're around in 30 years' time, we'll be having that same darn conversation. But look, my favorite part of the working week is meeting someone who's different than me. It's meeting someone who is in this, digital age. And I meet people of all ages, which is gorgeous because I think we place a hell of a lot of pressure on Gen Z and millennials and alphas going, you know it all. No, they don't. And I know some who are horribly undigital. And I know some people, you, me, our careers, like we're more digital than, people will ever have in their fingertips. And it's interesting. I've sat in interviews with a millennial who was interviewing someone older than them. And they were appalling. After the interview, what are you doing? Since they were older than me, I couldn't. It was age discrimination 1,000 miles over. So you see something in every generation. Mine is, look, talent should always rise to the top, and you're going to have to take bets. And I've met someone really interesting who is a digital and AI native. The freshness of what they're coming forward with, the ideas that they've got. I'm going, I don't care about your industry experience. I just want your brain. I would hire you tomorrow morning to sit in a corner and tell us what to do. And they're 22 years old. Do you know what I mean? That said, Dan, I'm going to hire you tomorrow morning and I bring you into any company. I turn around and say, Dan, what should we be doing? It's that bit in the middle, the messy middle, which is people. Until we as people actually turn around, forget, I did 80 hours, you're going to have to do 80 hours. You walk in every day with a blank slate and you go, okay, what are we going to learn today? How do we become a learning organization? How do we let talent rise to the top? We can see digital and AI a mile away. And if we can't do it, do you know something? Go and hire someone who can. Lose your, if it is such a thing as pride or stubbornness or whatever else, because ultimately we're here to, deliver value for our business. The more value we deliver and the more we do that in an intelligent AI automated way, the more we earn the right to exist going forward. So bring them on. I love it. Absolutely love it. But we need to adopt a mindset of lifelong learning at every generation. And we need to be a little bit more comfortable with each other.
Yeah, and I think, at least for the time being, these are still tools, meaning, these aren't fully autonomous digital agents yet, right? And so, I think there's a good half step here, for organizations to say, okay, I might have the institutional knowledge and the 30 years of experience, but I'm not familiar with the new tools. I mean, a crude example is, if you're a marketing executive, right, you might bring somebody in to lead your TikTok advertising, right? You understand marketing as a whole, but you may not be an expert in that particular platform. I think that is the opportunity, for AI right now, because, as you say it, these born AI, born, digital. I mean, you see the evolution even in my own household, right? I mean, people have heard me, tell this joke about how, my kids, have grown up with Alexas. We got them when they were, born basically, and they've grown up with it. I had to explain to my son the other day in the car why, he couldn't pick the song on the radio. I'm like, do you hear that woman talking? That's called a DJ. She decides what music gets played, not you. And those sorts of things. But in all seriousness, right? You look at, my mom called me the other day asking me for the phone number for Uber, right? And she wants to print out the plane tickets that are in the app on her phone, right? And you take that, and then you skip my generation. You go to my son. You have these conversations. When we were kids about, is it good to use calculators? You're not going to know the math. My son sits there, does his math homework, and when he has to do a basic arithmetic, he asks Alexa. He goes, Alexa, what's 10 times 120? And gets the answer. And at first, my wife's like, oh, you can't do that. That's cheating. I'm like, you know what? Let him do it. You know why?
Yeah.
Because that's a better skill than what they're teaching in schools anyway. He's not going to have to know how to get to that number. He's going to have to know how to prompt the AI to get the results that he wants and build, a more complicated answer based on the prompt. So I'm like, go for it. That's beautiful. He's like doing prompt engineering already.
I love that. I love that. It's the same, look at my own household. My son there's working with me this summer. Works with me all year, by the way. But this summer he's, out of school, out of college, out of doing what he's doing. But he built a website the other day using, Mid-Journey. Online, he's Substacked up. He's on LinkedIn building his own brand. He's prompting away. He makes more use of ChatGPT Pro that I have than I do myself. He's writing a course with me and something else, and that's in the first 2 weeks. And you're going, damn, wow, that's putting the right tech in the right hands, allowing someone to create a huge amount of value in no time. But here we go back to this. Like I come across companies all the time, Dan, because I go and train them. And instead of just giving them the damn tool, and that's a grown ass, what I call young adult, and it's adult conversation. Don't do this. Don't put private stuff online. And I've met companies who are 9 months into writing their AI policy going, not too sure if we should give our staff Chat GPT or Copilot in case they put something out on the internet. That is parent-child. And you wonder why things don't move. This isn't even putting AI in. This is deciding whether they can get the license. At the same time, their staff are on the mobile phones with ChatGPT or something else, already doing the work. I think just go back to what you're saying, like our education system. And again, I feel sorry for teachers because if it's like, the UK and the US and globally, it's underfunded. I was dealing with a group of very senior professors and lecturers. I was in Oxford Said Business School yesterday, and I was teaching them, about AI, and they're going back excited. They're going back to change curriculum. They're going back to go, right, I understand what this looks like and what we need to do. And I'm going to write a policy in the next, 30 days. And then I'm going to put AI out and we're going to do this. And we're going to change the curriculum and we're going to create a university and experience an environment that people want, because if we don't, then we're not doing our job, which is preparing the next generation for work. So it sort of starts there. How do we get our educators the knowledge that they need to educate, turn their further education, higher education, colleges and universities into digital places that are preparing kids and young adults for the next stage? But this goes back to work, as I said a moment ago. We bring people in, they're heroes. Then we don't train them. Then we sack them. And we go, well, it's their fault for not understanding that we need, a prompt engineer somewhere. And you're going, we've got to get this balance between what work needs. And I don't just mean today, because you can pretty much predict what workplaces are going to look like in the next 3, 4, and 5 and 6 years. AI is hell, automated, digital, global, you name it, multicultural. And therefore, look, how do we start people at college now getting those courses ready and those skills ready? So we're creating career-ready kids or young adults ready to work in the workforce. But how inside of workplaces do we end up with every generation participating and every generation being career pathed so that we're actually putting value into people? Now, if that's value into someone and they leave the firm, then brilliant. Better that than not putting money into someone and then staying and slowing the firm down and it breaking over time, because that will happen. So I think we've a lot of work to do. And the bit that worked well in Ireland about 2 decades ago was you'd employers, you'd the government, and you had educators all working together to create an environment for business that was, it had legislation, it had rules, fantastic, you need those. But the education environment was preparing workers for the next generation, hence why Ireland's population is young and well qualified, certified. And employers could guarantee a steady flow of very clever people coming into the workplaces, which then meant they could earn money, which then meant they could put,
Right.
more money into their own staff. So, and there was a bit of a long-term view taken. Now I feel that we're not preparing the kids for the next generation. We're underfunding education globally. As employers, we're sort of, it's not job enrichment, it's job enlargement, it's redundancies, it's operational efficiencies, it's short-termism. And we've a governments in between struggling to work out what the hell is happening at a time when tax revenues are decreasing because the population is shrinking. So we kind of need a reset. Otherwise, what we're going to do is this new generation that hates clunk, that, loves gamed performance, that, wants reverse mentorship, that wants a purposeful role, they won't exist. So we'll end up in not just fractional roles, but fractions of roles, short-term gigs, insecurity, and workplaces that will break down. And I know what we'll do. We'll get rid of the middle managers, because that must be the problem. Instead of actually, how do we take a slightly longer term view than 6 months at the stock market and actually invest in people and companies and careers and countries to create an environment where everybody wants to work and everyone can succeed? Because boy, do we need it.
You just said it. I wanted to go there, right? I mean, part of it is that we have to create a workforce that people want to participate in. I mean, you and I did a show a couple months back on the gig economy, right, where people are kind of doing side hustles, multiple things or whatever, and I think that's inevitable to some extent. But I speak to corporations who complain to me offline and say, nobody's loyal anymore, right? And my response is, since when have you been loyal to your employees, right? I mean, job cuts, layoffs, reshifts, acquisitions, mergers, de-investiture, right? Now technology and AI, right? So the days of people, talk about the generational gap. I mean, my grandfather worked for one company his entire life. My dad worked for 5 companies his entire life. My peers, are half a retirement age and already on their 10th job, right? So maybe more. So part of that is the employer creating this environment, and some of this AI savviness is probably part of it, but there's just different dynamics where you have to get to a point where people actually want to participate in the workforce. There was some data out of Microsoft. A research report said that they put out said that across large enterprises, 1 in 5 meetings are happening outside of business hours. Right, 16% of meetings are happening after 8 o'clock, and almost 60% are impromptu meetings. So that means you got to be available basically 24/7. So if that's the case, you also need to allow some flexibility, and an environment where you're not just doing, as you say, the clutter, the BS stuff. I remember early in my career, and this is before AI and a lot of this stuff, working for a tech company. I was like, very confused. I'm like, for every half an hour of work I do, I have a half an hour worth of paperwork. Right. I mean, that's just not I mean, I'm like a young kid getting my hands dirty with tech, and I'm like excited about it. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm doing paperwork. Like most of the time I'm doing paperwork. That's not attractive. And, obviously I didn't stick with that job, but that's happening at scale, to your point now, right, with AI.
Yeah, well, come in as a lawyer and you're still expected to do, 50, 60 hours the old way,
Right.
not using the digital tech that's in there. Yeah, and it is extraordinary, and I see big corps doing this all the time. We want loyalty in our terms. We'll lay off 15, 16,000 people, but see, the message we're sending everyone is, we care. Yeah, actually, you know, let's be transparent. It's an economic transaction. If you didn't need them, you don't need them. Your job is to maximize profit. You know, something to me, absolutely fine. But I worked in a large, I'll not name them to shame them, you know, a tech company went, you know, customers first, which I absolutely agree with, staff second, shareholders third. And it sold this vision. Actually, when I was coming in, I was quite skeptical. And I went, you know, I said, okay, I'll believe it. You know, I'll lean into it. And a couple of months later, they laid off 20% of the workforce to raise the share price, which inevitably went up for a period of time and then went straight back down. And now you're sort of going, well, you've lost the narrative, you know. So, but again, I seen the same thing during COVID when, you know, firms were hiring and firing beforehand. Then they desperately needed people, and to a degree, you know, people demanded too much. You know, you want me to work on a Friday? Actually, I have shopping to do. You know, it went too far one way, and I predicted this because I've seen it multiple times. Folks, you will take all this, but you will be told to get back to the office. And I remember doing polls on LinkedIn and writing stories, and people arguing, no, it won't happen. The world has changed. And change that much, and it recycles and recycles and recycles. Now it's come in or you're out of the business. So now you're telling people you have to come in 5 days a week. They're miserable in the office. And they're going, right, I'll wait until I can go. Market's uncertain, so everybody's going, well, they're all staying. Trust me, you're forcing back into your office, the moment the market changes again, people are going to walk with their feet. So where do we actually get this adult relationship that, you know, there is some give and there is some take, that we realize as employees, look, we're here to earn money for a shareholder, for a business, and therefore I need to do my best. And an employer invests in the longer term and actually doesn't say, I want your loyalty, but I'm going to sack you. I want you to work at 8 o'clock at night, but I'm not going to invest in you. There's a win-lose there. And every time there's a win-lose, whoever's losing, they don't like it and they will come back and they will remember. So how do we get to win-win, whatever that looks like in a business? For me, the employers that I've stuck with the most, and I've been with employers, you know, 10 years and 12 years and something else, were the one we had that adult relationship. I got paid, I got invested in, I gave my all, and that relationship really worked. In the last lot of years, I'm probably like yourself. You know, my job, because industry changed, went from 10-year, 12-year to suddenly 5-year, 3 years, 2 years, 18 months, you know, and that short termism, it just gets everybody to think in the same way. So loyalty to a degree, it wasn't there in the main or hasn't been, and it won't be there for some time. So look, there's a new world, there's a new dynamic, there's a new workforce coming in. But if we want this all to work, we're going to have to work together. We're going to have to get, you know, all of the digital and all of the AI natives coming into work. We're going to have to give them the tools that they need, but we're going to have to get everybody the tools that they need, because you dump your middle managers, you dump your older workers who don't get it. Yeah, I've seen that time and time again over the last 3 decades. You've denuded the company of longer term knowledge, of the emotional intelligence, of the understanding of the market. Of I've seen this before 3 times. But again, that age group also need to go, I've seen it 3 or 4 times, but see you, actually, why don't we do it differently this time? And I'll open my ears and I'll bring in that tech. I'll reverse mentor you, you reverse mentor me. And why don't we make it go with us? That's the bit that would excite me. People, tech, and business and people strategy all working together. Now, that would be something that I would love to see, and probably one of the first times in my career. And I've been around 30-something years working, if not longer.
Sounds good, Kieran. Good advice. Good advice. We'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We're back on Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. In the meantime, if you're looking for some help, some advice, you want to talk to someone like Kieran, who has more letters after his name every time I speak to him, go to irpaai.com/analyst for more information. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody. Kieran, thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Good luck, everyone.